This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com with my special guest today, the man who helped get the Ultimate Warrior, Sting, The Miz, John Cena, Heidenreich, countless others, enough to fill a book into this business. Rick Bassman, how are you today, sir?
John, hey, Devin, I'm sorry. I got some feedback there for a minute. We're all good now. I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
I'm not doing bad at all. I'm just here to address the Jim Cornette stuff, but unfortunately, we got some bad news today about Rick Drayson passing away at 76. Did you want to say anything about that before we get into the Jim Cornette?
Yeah, I did. It's always sad when when another brother falls, and we kind of knew. Hard to find the words on this one, man. We knew it was coming in many ways. Rick, like myself, has been through so many physical and medical wars over the past like 3 decades. Oh, man, how are you still alive? But it's not about me. This is Rick. You can say the same thing about Rick. How did he make it as long as he did? And like you said, also to the age that he was. Rick was a good dude. He's a complicated guy. I've known him for a long, long time through the business, of course. But and I said I dated in high school 40 years ago. So Rick and I had a lot in common, a lot of common ground. And again, he was in my condolences out too.
And the reason that we had you on today was to discuss some of the things that Jim Cornette has said about you that you wanted to address since he didn't take you up on your challenge. We have the link to that challenge video posted in the description, but there was 7 comments that Cornette made about you that you wanted to address. So we'll go through them one by one if you're ready to go.
Yeah, I want to say something about that first. I'm definitely ready to address them. It's kind of an odd thing for me. I like these days to kind of like consider myself above the fray and not getting caught up in all the back and forth BS that so many people, not only in our business do, but life in general. All you have to do is log on to Facebook today and watch people just at war with one another. Devin, you're getting to know me. I'm getting to know you, through my Talking Tough show and all that. I do my level best to avoid conflict and avoid fighting and all that. So, I'm questioning like why I feel the desire or even the need to respond to this guy. And I think I realize it, and at the risk of sounding overly dramatic or making this a lot more important than it really is, I've been thinking a lot about my own mortality lately. And then you see like today, Rick passes, because we were just having this conversation yesterday, myself and another friend, and you've got this guy Jim Cornette, who I barely even know, who has been throwing all these accusations and, like I say, half truths and outright lies at me for going on darn near 20 years now. And, he's got a much bigger forum than I do. Thank you for giving me your forum today. To know yours is bigger than Jim Cornette's, and that's pretty awesome. And I don't know, legacy, I guess, is important. Reputation is important. So I guess I actually do care after all. And I just wanted to have the opportunity to respond to his half-truths and outright lies on a forum that's larger than his own. We know that Jim Cornette has his very, very dedicated fans. We know that, and it's kind of like one of those drink the Kool-Aid situations where the guy can do no wrong. Well, whatever he says goes. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of hate slung at us, me especially, through doing this. But, it's interesting. In the challenge that I made, after doing that, I was asked to be on a lot of different shows. One was Kenny Bolins, who was like best friend with Jim for 40 years. And I explained a lot of my position on Kenny's show. And I got personal messages from die-hard Cornette fans going, wow, I listened and I hear what you're saying, you know, and I appreciate what you had to say. So, you know what? Hopefully, I just wanted a forum to get the word out. Hopefully people will listen rather than having a preconceived notion about, you know, what Cornette's version of the truth is. And that's that. So here we go, I suppose.
Okay, so the first of the Cornette comments you wanted to address was on the subject of WWE developmental territories in the early 2000s. You, of course, had UPW, which was a WWE development territory at the time. And he said this about you, quote, and they tried to do that fucking goofy, bald-headed idiot Rick Bassman. That was just an excuse for Bruce to go to Los Angeles once in a while, and Bassman would take him out to the titty bars. They got no work done there. They never trained any decent wrestlers because it was just showbiz, Hollywood, bullshit wrestling school out there. But at least we got Cena away from him. End quote.
Cool. Wow. You know what? I think you said we've got this broken down in like to 7 different sections. There was like 5 or 6 things in there alone. But let me start with this one. I've heard this and let's to set the record really straight. It wasn't WWE back then. We all call it that now, of course. It was WWF at the time. I had 2 development deals as UPW with that company. The first one was contractually with World Wrestling Federation, so WWF. I've heard Cornette say many times throughout the years, the only reason we had a deal was so I could take Bruce to titty bars. So here's the first thing. This is not a half truth on his part. This is one of his outright salacious lies. Jim Cornette, if you ever hear anything from me, hear this. And it sounds so funny that I am focused on this, but never once, not one time, Jim, I know you can count to 1, never once took Bruce Pritchard to a titty bar. Jim, never once. So that's bullshit. It's a lie. It's part of the story you like to tell, and maybe it makes you feel good about your own hot tub shenanigans. I don't know. But here's the thing. Bruce came out a lot, and we had a really good relationship. Jim Ross came out often. Jerry Briscoe was out a lot. And I never took any of those guys to titty bars. Personally, I don't even like them. That's a whole nother thing, but never my thing. And I don't think it was theirs either, at least to my knowledge, because I never, Jim Cornette, took Bruce Pritchard to a titty bar. Hope you can understand that. We had a lot of fun when they were out, me and Bruce and JR and Jerry. We'd go out mainly to Korean barbecue. We would have drinks more often than not at the hotel they were staying at, usually the airport Sheraton at LAX. So let's dispel that titty bar thing once and for all, please. As far as never getting any work done goes, I mean, you know, I don't really know what to say about that. I know this is one of those things where you can interpret as you will, because the truth is going to be as you see it. We worked our asses off, I can tell you that. Cornette, I know, did not appreciate the quality of our work. Now, that is that's subjective. If that's his opinion, then that's his opinion. I can say this. We had some very good, first of all, we had 2 schools that I paid rent on. It was not an inexpensive operation to run. One in Orange County, one in Los Angeles. We ran, I think, a total of about 8 classes a week, 2 practice shows a week, then not even counting the UPW shows. The school was called Ultimate University. We had over 1,000 students through the doors over the years. We taught promo class, we did character development class way before OVW ever did it. I understand that they adopted their promo class from the format that we created, and the we was myself and Brett Wagner, known as the Big Schwag. And I thought we did a pretty good job of it. I'm a terrible promo guy, but I think I understand the psychology behind promos, behind character development. I can tell you I put a lot of hours in. Cornette may not equate those hours with work. Again, it's all subjective. As far as the quality of what we did, the output, look at our instructors, Chris Daniels, Kevin Quinn, Frankie Kazarian, Mikey Henderson, Mike Bell, Tom Howard, our head instructor, Mike Bucci, Nova, who later was an executive in talent development, We had some very, very good instructors. The funny thing was we didn't get any direction from WWE how they wanted people trained or developed. And it wasn't for lack of asking or lack of trying. So we kind of winged it. But I thought we did a pretty good job. I thought we worked awfully hard. So Jim Cornette, that's what I call a half truth, because again, it's subjective. I think our work record speaks for itself. We did deliver exactly 43 men and women from UPW up to WWF and then WWE, where UPW was the final stop before signing a contract. And of that 43, I'd have to count, but I'd say roughly half had never before stepped foot in a pro wrestling ring before we delivered them up. So that's a big number, and it's probably a number that will never be equaled in the history of wrestling schools again. In any case, that's I think that answers that first charge.
Yes, I believe it does. And the second one, this is another long quote from Cornette. He says, quote, Bassman's a piece of shit. He's one of those guys, every time there's a TV documentary to be done to expose the business, they'd come to him and he'd provide them and make sure that, as long as you give me credit or a check or whatever, I don't care what you're saying about the wrestling business. I've seen one of those Rick Bassman co-operated exposés on television. This is back in like 2004. And I was sitting in Danny Davis's office cursing that fucking Bassman, telling Danny what a piece of shit he was, how they exposed the business on television, and everyone that went along with it ought to be shot and boiled in oil. End quote.
Yeah. It's funny. People have asked me many times over the years, why does Jim Cornette hate you so much? And in my mind, although he, yaps and goes on endlessly about numerous things, it comes down to, I think, two things. I don't think it's me being a fucking idiot. That's a quote unquote from him. Me being a midget. I guess he's got stuff against little guys. I don't know. In any case, I'm sorry, I'm reading the comments from your listeners. I'm going to stop doing that. I'm getting distracted. But I appreciate people writing in, even if it's not nice, because let's get it out once and for all. One of the reasons is that, and I think it comes up later, if I'm not mistaken, he talks about me stealing money from the boys and having my hand in their pocket. And I really look forward to addressing that. I think that's the biggest one. The other is my hand in these documentaries that quote unquote expose the business, and then taking a credit and a check. Okay. So to all of the above. I did all of those things. But let's again look at it from, Jim Cornette's interesting. He seems to only have one point of view, and that point of view is his own. I like to think my best to see. People say there's three sides to every story. God knows there's at least two. I always try to see the perspective from both sides before I pass judgment. He's never either wanted to do that or just doesn't have the capacity to do that. So here's my side of that last accusation. I did, and I say I'm saying I because we have a forum here today. I like to say, as my team, my colleagues would say, I'm much more a we, us, and our kind of person. The credit or discredit is always due to a group, much more so than one person. In this case, credit and real credits. All these documentaries we did, the training tapes and all that. First of all, I thought were very, very good productions, quality, but doesn't mean we didn't do them. So the first one Cornette went nuts about was roughly the year 2000. We released a special called On the Inside Pro Wrestling School. That was on the Discovery Channel. And I was approached by a man named Tom Beers, Beers, who ran Original Productions. Tom was a guy who created The World's Deadliest Catch, Ice Road Truckers, Axemen, one of the top guys in the history of the reality business. He came to me and said, I'm doing a series for Discovery where we go on the inside of different worlds or businesses and do an hour on them. We want to do one on pro wrestling. We've heard a lot about you guys. We'd like to do it exclusively with your school, Ultimate University, and your company, Ultimate Pro Wrestling. So it sounded interesting. Looked up Tom, his credentials. They were real. We talked about, now here's the first thing Cornette needs to listen to. Dummy, if you're out there, shut your yap for a second and listen to this. This is about 2000. A couple of years before that, Barry Blaustein had come out with Beyond the Mat, another very good documentary about behind the scenes in pro wrestling. Guys like Mick Foley, who I know you respect and should, because Mick deserves respect, were a big part of that. Roland Alexander, who I later became friends with, was a very big part of that. So Cornette, we weren't the first to do it. Let's go back even further. The first true expose that I know of was done, believe it or not, by Harley Race. And you can look it up. This is public record. Jim, Harley Race. I mean, one of the most respectable and respected, and rightfully so, people in the history of the pro wrestling world. So, Jim, did you have the same problem with Harley exposing the business? I don't think you ever brought it up, nor did you certainly, to my knowledge at least, I could be wrong, call Vince McMahon all sorts of bad names for doing Tough Enough, which came out right after my documentary. So maybe I was an easy target for Cornette. He ignored Harley Race. He ignored Beyond the Mat. Another funny thing, there's a couple more funny aspects to this. But what I was going to say was this. Here's what you need to listen to, dummy. If you look at that special, or the one I did the following year, we did, for the Learning Channel, called The Making of a Pro Wrestler, Body Slam, they're both, first of all, very, very good quality. Secondly, and this was an absolute condition I had for the executive producers, Tom Beers on the Discovery Channel, Dennis Lofgren for the one on the Learning Channel. Guys, we all know the business is what it is now because Vince first spoke about it at trial and when the business became known as sports entertainment. We all know that it's engineered, results are predetermined. But if we do these documentaries, we are going to treat this business with the respect that it deserves. And if you look at any of the things I ever had my hand in, this, again, it's subjective, but I would say 99 out of 100 people say, wow, Bassman and his team really respected the business and the way they portrayed it in these specials and the way they produced the specials. We showed how hard it was, how much dedication it takes, that it's not the glamorous world people think it is. I mean, I felt like we did the business a justice. That's my opinion. Jimmy Boy is entitled to his. As far as taking a credit or a check or both, yeah. I mean, it's a business, right, Jim? And that's something I don't think you seem to understand. I'm feeling like I need to defend a position, and I really don't want to come off as defensive here. Again, it's a forum to get my version of these half-truths, or in my case, I believe full truths out. When Tom Beers came to me to produce the Discovery special, we got to know each other pretty quickly, and he caught on pretty fast to the fact that I was a seasoned TV producer. I had won an Emmy Award as a producer for the Walt Disney Company a couple of years before that. I was an agent at the William Morris Company years before that. In addition to like a long history in pro wrestling, I have a legit, somewhat long, very long history in the entertainment world as well. So producer, why would I not take that? And he offered me a fee of $10,000, which I gladly accepted. Why wouldn't I take that? Discovery was funding the show. Producers are part of the budget. I was offered $10,000. Of course I took that. Now, Jim, where would that $10,000 go? Would it go to contributing to rent on the 2 buildings that I had, on insurance for both schools? I think in a day when no other wrestling schools, or maybe no other schools, paid for insurance in case their guys and girls got hurt, for the marketing materials that we created, so on and so forth. So one last note on this. And Devin, I'm going to give you long answers to short questions because you did give me the forum today. And I do want to get my version out once and for all only. And I want to be done with it. Funny thing Jim always says. He says, you know, that little fucker exposing the business. And do they have magician school? Do they ever go behind the scenes to give away magic secrets? That fucker. So anyway, I don't do a very good my imitations are about, or impressions are about as good as my promos, so apologies. But I think it makes a point. Here's a funny thing about Jim saying that. The show that featured Harley Race, when Harley did the behind the scenes documentary on the pro wrestling industry before I did, was produced by a company called Nash Entertainment. Not Kevin Nash, another guy who doesn't love Jim Cornette, by the way, but a company called Nash Entertainment, well known in the LA TV world. The year before that, Nash Entertainment produced a 1-hour special behind the scenes in the world of magic, Jim. How's that for irony? The same company that produced Harley Race's behind the scenes in pro wrestling special Did the same thing the year before on Magic.
Yeah, I remember that Harley Race pro wrestling special. It was called Pro Wrestling Exposed, and it was on mainstream television during the Attitude Era. It didn't really expose too much, but Harley was definitely in it, giving away some of the secrets. And yeah, there's a former 8-time world champion and WWE Hall of Famer taking a payday for that. So it was already exposed a long time ago.
Yeah, way before. And again, I would say for people, you know, if you have an hour to kill, search how would you find it? Discovery Pro Wrestling School. And our documentary, yeah, that's the one the first one that we produced. It's on YouTube, I know that. And it's pretty darn good. If I say so myself. And again, I think you'll see how No, that was the second one. The one with Heidenreich was the Learning Channel special. That was the stars of that were Heidenreich, Mikey Henderson, who should have been a big star, but unfortunately wasn't, and Chris Daniels, and then Drayson McBee, who passed not long afterwards. She would have been something in the business. The first one, the Discovery special, that's the one with Justin McCauley from UFC, John Cena, and a bunch of others. Anyway, that's searchable on YouTube. Go watch it, please. I think anybody would agree that we treat the business very seriously and very respectfully in that documentary.
And I even remember at one point around 2006, I almost came to train at UPW, and I remember seeing the contract, and there was nothing in that contract about lifetime payments, but there was the free training and so forth.
Right. So you haven't addressed that yet. I'm sorry, Devin. That I know that's part of a later question. Should I address that now, or do you want to wait till?
No, we'll address it later. We'll get into the number 3 quote here. Here it is. Quote, another time, Rick Bassman brought that Tom Howard, who is a heck of a talent, and this other guy as a tag team for a dark match tryout at one of the Raw tapings, and he insisted on being their manager, Ricky B. Well, Tom Howard's partner was one of the most, he looked like the Ultimate Warrior his first year in the business, one of the most cartoonishly jacked up, steroided bodybuilders I'd ever seen, and he had only 3 or 4 matches, and he was the shits, even though he was a nice guy and trained hard. But Bassman brought him because he knew Vince liked bodies. So Ricky B was the manager of this big bodybuilding fuck, and Tom Howard, who was a heck of a talent, and Howard was incredibly impressive. And I think if he'd been having a singles match, he'd have gotten a job. But with this schlub bodybuilding tag team partner and the goofy manager that didn't know what he was doing outside, it was a shitty match. And they just humored the guy because he gave them local job guys as fill-in talent from his fucking school, and also took Bruce to titty bars when he went out there. And that's why Rick Bassman, for a short period of time, was affiliated with WWE, end quote.
That's a lot of stuff. I was taking notes. I am paying attention. I'm taking notes so I can try to address most of the points here. I'm sure I'll miss something. If I do, Devin, and it's something that you think was good, let me know, of course, and I'll go back. So let's let's get into as much of this as quickly as we can. First of all, did I manage the big time? And that was the name of the tag team for Tom Howard and Hank Hill.
Your sound is cutting out a bit.
It was a cartoon name, but Hank Hill was actually a real person and a good person. I did manage him. As Tom heard this recently, that he actually remembered, Cornette remembered the name Ricky B. That's a testament to his memory, because I barely remembered that. No. How could I insist, first of all? This is not my show. It's Vince McMahon's show. You know what Jerry's answer was? Sure, absolutely. He goes, you know what? So big with the blonde, with bleach blonde hair. You're so small with the bald head. You'll actually accentuate their size. Yeah, it's a good look. Give it a shot. Great. I was pretty surprised. He said, yeah, that was a thrill for me, by the way, to come down a WWF ramp one time in my life. It was it was a bucket list thing for sure. So that was cool to do. I'll jump ahead. Me in the role of manager, goofy manager. Okay, maybe I'm goofy. That's subjective again. Didn't know what I was doing. Again, subjective, but I'll always be the first to admit, Devin, when I'm not very good at something. And as I said, I wasn't great on promos, and that's being generous to myself. I was not great as a manager either. I knew the basics. I asked. They said I could do it. It was a spot show or not televised, nothing to be lost. It was a lot of fun. Okay, let's address some of these other little things. Some things I want to point out. Just I think I I thought I'm stumbling, which I don't normally do, because I really didn't want to get into character assassination, what this guy Cornette does so much. But you know what? I am going to take the gloves off to a degree today and get into a little bit of my take on Jim Cornette's character. He talked about Hank Hill and he described Hank's look first, Ultimate Warrior. I mean, yeah, he was gigantic. He was bigger than Warrior, but he was 6 foot tall, bleach blonde hair, short hair, didn't look anything look like Warrior, but absolutely massive guy. So Cornette starts, here's the character reference. He says, a nice guy. And then later in the same quote, he goes on calling him a bodybuilding fuck, didn't know what the fuck he was doing. I mean, it's fuck this, fuck that, calling Hank names, a guy he doesn't know, who 2 minutes ago he called a nice guy. Now he's cussing him out. What people right now are probably laughing at me, but this is the way my brain works. What makes a guy like Jim Cornette be the kind of person he is that constantly has to attack other people that he doesn't know with the name calling, the meanness, sometimes a downright cruelty? That's, I think, Devin, why more than anything, in addition to protecting my own name for what that's worth, I just wanted to get on here and say, Cornette, you're 58. I know that because we're the same age. You're like 40 days older than I am. Yep, I looked it up for the tail of the tape for our would-be fight that you're not answering the challenge to, by the way, despite the fact you've threatened to kill me God knows how many times over the years. Hank Hill was a really good guy. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. He really did not have a lot of business being in a tryout match, save for one reason. He looked the part back in the day when looks meant more than anything else. Cornette made it like an accusation that I brought this big bodybuilding fuck because Vince liked bodies. Well, dummy. When I say dummy, I'm talking to Cornette, of course. Of course, I'm going to bring what Vince and company likes because I'm working for the company. So I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I brought what my, not employer, but the person that held the strings to my independent contract wanted me to do. So of course I'm going to bring guys like that. Jim also goes, Tom Howard, who Jim puts over big, which blew me away, as he should, because Jim doesn't put anybody over associated with me. So it's refreshing to see him putting Tom over, because if anybody deserves that, it's Tom Howard. He's one of the nicest human beings in the history of this business and one of the most talented. Here was a trick for Tom at that point, though. Tom was 6'4", 265 pounds. This is rough. Great look. But, and here's the but, the guys that Vince was looking at then were guys that looked like Hank Hill. There were the first three signees out of UPW and my school, Ultimate Pro Wrestling, were Sylvester Turkaya, who you probably remember, Stephon Gamlin, who you may not, and Russ McCullough, who you almost surely don't. Well, Sylvester, at 6', 6.5 inches tall and 325 pounds, was the little guy of that bunch of three. I remember pushing Sylvester and Stephon and Russ and Tom all to WWF at the same time. But contracts were offered to the other three and not to Tom. Now, this is no offense to Russ and Stephon and Sylvester, who are also very good guys. Tom was 10 times better than all three of them put together. He just wasn't at that moment the exact type they were looking for. So Cornette, this is subjective again, and I might be splitting hairs, but I'm answering this SHIT once and for all, almost sounds like he wants to turn Tom against me in a way by saying I held him back by putting him with Hank. The fact of the matter was, after Tom, who later did get a deal because he deserved a deal, he got passed over the first time. in my thinking, correct or not, putting him with Hank in this package would give him a better chance of getting signed at that moment. So I thought that'd be worth explaining, Devin. Like I said, I'm going to give a lot of long answers to short questions today. It's the only time I'm going to do this, and then we'll get past it. I took notes, and I think that. Oh, and at the end, again, he brings up the titty bar thing. Well, we've already dispelled that. But Jim, I'll tell you this: if you ever man up enough to accept the challenge I finally issued, it sounds like you're dying for me to take you out to a titty bar. I don't like them myself, but Jim, if it give you your jollies, maybe we'll do it.
Well, I'll just give a shout out to Crypto Spasm that tipped us $20 and Double S that tipped us $10. So thank you very much, you two. Rick and I will split any tips we get on this.
Wait, I don't. What is that? Tips? I have no idea.
The fans in the chat. The fans in the chat are able to give tips. So you have some people that are Cornette supporters.
I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you then. That's cool. I didn't know they did that. I think that's a testament, Devin, to your following to Hannibal TV's following on YouTube. That's amazing. And hopefully my YouTube will get to that point one of these days. I posted on my Facebook and Instagram the other day. By the way, guys, I need followers. There's my Instagram, Rick_Bassman. Please follow me. I'm trying to build my brand also. I posted a follow-up to my challenge with Cornet, and I added a wager this time out. Devin, I don't know if you saw it or not, but I'm like, hey, man, if we do this fight, let's each put up 10 grand, and whoever wins will direct the loser where to donate that money. And if it ever happens, and I doubt it, seriously, if it happens, and I was to win, which is against odds also, I would donate my money to 4 different women-run pit bull rescues. So, Devin, anything that people are tipping today, which is amazing, I want to say right now that it's going to go to those rescues.
Very good, and let's get into point number 4 as we reach the halfway point here. This is another quote from Jim Cornette, and Bassman was all about trying to get guys signed because another thing Bassman had was a fucking deal that if you went to his wrestling school, you signed a deal that if you got signed, you got a percentage of your money on an ongoing basis with apparently no cutoff date. Can you imagine if he got 10 or 20% of Cena's money? I helped anybody I ever knew that had a signed contract like that with him or anybody else find a lawyer to get out of it, because that's bullshit to train a guy and then say, okay, now you owe me money for the rest of your fucking life. Okay, Moolah, at least Vern had to cut off with Flair. And before you answer, thanks, Big Dummy, for the $5 tip. And he says Cordy just wants to watch you nail his piglet while he watches.
Oh, my God. Wow. That's funny. I'll get to that question in a minute. I know that's a big one, but it's funny what Big Dummy said. Devin, Cornette has been threatening for years now to quote unquote skull fuck me. And you know what I find particularly disturbing about that? I think that infers he would actually have to get aroused to do that. And that's just the whole idea of that is so disturbing. So, Big Dummy, you're probably spot on with what you just said, man. Who knows what floats this guy's boat? I know back in the day at UPW, we'd hear and I'm not saying this is true, it's hearsay, but we hear all kinds of stories about the weirdness that was perpetrated by Mr. and Mrs. C behind the scenes for people to either get their spot or keep their spot. Conversely, I think if you ever talked, certainly, I say to all the guys, any of the many women that went through UPW, and that's Ivory and Victoria and Molina. We didn't start Molina. She was with us for a short period of time. And Sadist and Muffy Maurer and on and on. I think to cheerleader Melissa, to a woman, they will tell you they were treated with nothing but respect at UPW. I'm certain of that. And then it was absolutely a safe and non-threatening atmosphere. I wanted to get that out there. Before we get on to what I know is Cornette's biggest bone of contention with me, and that is the idea of me taking money out of the guy's pockets. Devin, you mentioned halfway point. Are we wrapping this at 1 hour today?
No, we'll wrap it whenever you're done. Whenever you're done the answers, and there were some. It depends how long, but there were some fan questions on here for you that we could possibly get at the
I would
end.
love to do. I would love to do some of the fan questions, even if they're not nice. It's fine. We should do it. The reason I asked, this is definitely the longest one, and it might. I hope it doesn't bore people. I'll try to make it interesting. The idea about me taking money out of the boys' pockets. Okay, so I want to jump forward, and then I'm going to come back. He talked about doing anything he could to get guys out of these contracts with me. By the way, it's called tortious interference, something I could have sued him for, because I know one case in particular he did that with was Sylvester Turkai, who was a very good friend of mine, and to this day is one of my dearest friends on this planet, Sylvester Turkai. Back in the day when Sylvester signed, the average development deal, this is right at the beginning of pro wrestlers being paid to train. It's when, the business started to shift. And that's a problem I think that stuck with Cornette. He's like stuck in that DeLorean and Back to the Future. He doesn't realize the world and the business changed, where legitimate representation and management was coming into the business. And that was right when we came in with Barry Bloom. A new thing back then as well were guys getting paid to train. The very first developmental deals that WWF gave out were $300 a week per person. Doesn't sound like a lot when you keep in mind that before that, it was wrestlers paying their own way, living out of their cars, eating tuna fish out of the cans. We all know those stories, and they're very true stories. Now they're getting paid $300 a week. When Sylvester started with WWF, his starting deal was $100,000 for the first year. And I know that because myself and Barry Bloom, the first, real manager in pro wrestling. When I say real, that's not a slight against Jimmy Hart or Bobby Heenan or Jim Cornette himself. They had a very cool role in wrestling as a show manager. Barry Bloom was the first real manager in the business, meaning he legitimately represented people's business behind the scenes. Pro wrestling was probably the last sports or entertainment form that I know of that had real representatives. Before that, it's like, let the boys do their own deals, which is kind of crazy. Now, people right now might be going, wow, well, why? So why would they need to pay you 10%? And that's what I want to get to. And by the way, Jim Cornette, my contracts, and Devin, if you saw the one I sent you all those years ago, my contracts were 10%. Jimmy, dummy, not 20. That's a lie. Okay, that's not subjective. 10%. Line number 2, little Jimbo, dum-dum, JC, they weren't forever, or as we say in the contractual world, in perpetuity. There was a 2-year term on the contract. That was the initial term. Now, yes, there were options to extend for successive 1-year periods of time, but those options are what's called at mutual discretion, meaning both sides, including the talent, would have to sign off on it. So I wanted to set that up. Sylvester got $100,000 in his first year. He was a real prospect. Jim Ross really, really wanted him. Now, when you've been an agent at William Morris, which I was, when you were an executive at the Walt Disney Company, which I was, you learn how to work in the upper echelons of the entertainment world. Part of that is negotiating deals. Now, there's an art to negotiating a deal, or as Barry Bloom would like to say, finesse. And it's understanding where the right deal is for both parties. I've seen people there's a lot of gym managers that would come into the business and suddenly be the manager of a UFC fighter that happened to be in the same gym. They would then call Dana White, who would take calls back then, and say, I want $1 million for my guy for the next fight. Well, that would lose a guy a deal immediately because it wasn't realistic. It was not within the realm of what made sense at that point. What you learn when you do this day in and day out is the experience to understand what the right deal is, where the push and the pull is, and how to ask. That's equally important. At the point I met Sylvester, we became friends. Barry Bloom and I formed a partnership to manage guys in the business. Sylvester was one of them. We knew what we were doing. We got him $100,000 as opposed to $300 a week. Now, let's see, 100,000, that's almost $2,000 a month. So let's, for sake of math, say it's $2,000 a month. Sylvester paid Barry and I a cumulative commission of 10%, or $200 a week. So after he paid us, he had $1,800 a week left, or $1,500 more than he would have had he done the deal himself. So that's important for guys like Jim Cornette, who can't see out of his own little box, to understand how the world works, Jim. And what blows me away about this, Hannibal and everybody else out there, Jim Cornette is clearly not an unintelligent guy. If anything, it's the opposite. He's very intelligent, but he's also at the same time extremely stupid, because he just does not seem to entertain that any perspective on this planet other than the microcosmic narrowness of his own perspective might have any merit. So I wanted to say that first. Now, as I mentioned before, there were 2 locations for my school. I set up one initially, not 2. The second one came years later after the first was successful. What did it take to make UPW, or Ultimate University, successful back in those days? I opened a gym in 1998 in Mission Viejo, California, called Extreme University. It was the first true mixed martial arts gym in California. I also built a pro wrestling ring. It cost me like $8,000 to build it. I didn't have a ton of money back then. I had some. But when I say that my wife and I invested every dollar that we had in Extreme University and the business, there is no exaggeration in that at all. We rented a building, we built a ring, we paid insurance, we paid for weight equipment, treadmills, ellipticals, showers, all that sort of thing. We hired real instructors like the Tom Howards, who later became a partner, and Chris Daniels and Kevin Quinn. We paid for the ring when it broke down. We promoted shows and lost a lot of money for years because I believed there was a win in this down the road. Now, that's a huge investment. This is not some gym trainer who works at a gym going, I'll be your manager. If someone has that relationship, great, more power to them. This was a well-intentioned, in my opinion, well thought out business plan. And Jim Cornette and all the other haters out there who look at me as the little greedy guy who stole money from the boys. Sylvester Turkai example aside, please consider the following. You're a pro wrestler in Southern California. You want a place to go study and train. You come in as a real prospect like John Cena did, who Cornette always brings up in association with me. So I'm going to address John Cena in a moment. So hold on for the John Cena stuff. If you make the investment that I made, would I be entitled possibly then to earning a commission on the guys if they go somewhere? Well, maybe, at least getting something back of my investment. Now consider the following in a case like Sylvester Turkai. I worked my ass off for many years to create this business. And again, the business premise was this. At the time, Monday Night Wars was going on. WCW versus WWF. They were competing for the same types of talent. Barry Bloom and I got into management together with the idea of recruiting guys who looked the part and women, getting them trained to the point they could get signed. And at that point, we would essentially bid them off to WWF, WCW, and to a lesser degree, ECW. That was our business plan. So I initially got into the business to be a talent representative. The WWF deal came later almost by accident. And I'm glad to tell that story another time, how that happened. It was Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard coming to me, but there's a lot of detail to that. So we now have, going back to the idea of a commission, we're going to manage guys. So what do? Well, we hire the best photographers that shoot those kinds of bodies and those kinds of looks. We help to invest in costuming or gimmicks. We invest in shows to showcase the guys. All things we lost money on for a long, long time. And then we made sure we got to know all of the buyers in the business. The buyers at that point were Eric Bischoff and Kip Frey and Jim Hurd, 2 guys at Cornette cusses up and down, left and right. Over at WCW, it was Paul Heyman for the most part at ECW. And then it was, at the time, Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard, and to a lesser degree, Jerry Briscoe. I got to know those guys really well, as I did anybody that was legitimate in the business at that time who might hire one of the people that my organization was developing. So I had assistants there, a secretary, which was a real term, we never call anybody that now, that I paid a salary to in an office that I paid rent for, on a phone that I paid a phone bill for, to answer the phone in a professional manner. So when people called, they knew they were dealing with a professional outfit. All of that. John Cena, I think, is a great example. John was introduced to me initially by the Bell Brothers. They brought him backstage to a UPW show. And, people give me credit for discovering John Cena. I don't credit myself for that. All you had to do is look at the guy and you could see it right away. Didn't take a genius to spot a potential star in John Cena. especially once you heard him open his mouth, the personality, the ability to project promos. You knew, even if he couldn't work in the ring at all, which he couldn't for years, he later got good. You knew he was going to be something special. So John came into the school, and as we did with all new students, my wife and I had a lot of bills to pay, and we didn't pay our own bills. We paid the school's bills first. And oftentimes come home to a wife who was near tears, wondering how we were going to pay our rent for that month. This is all part of the foundation. Not to feel bad for me, but I want you to understand my perspective. John Cena came up to me about 2 months after being in the school. When you first enroll, back in those days, later, Devin, we offered scholarships to guys we spotted with potential right away, like yourself. With John, like everybody else, he enrolled. He paid $250 a month to train at the school. Enough students, we could start to meet all these bills that we had to pay every month. 2 months after he started, may have been 3, I'm not exact, I don't know for sure. John came to me literally in tears saying he did not have the money to pay for wrestling school any longer. And he asked if I could let him go for a free ride. And, I didn't love John as a human being. I saw the potential. The reason I bring up the human side of it is this. I remember thinking when I was looking at him with the tears that I'd seen my wife recently with tears. How are we going to pay our bills legitimately? Here's a guy who's spending a lot of money on food and God knows what else, managing to survive, now does not want to pay the tuition at the school that I've invested in. And I'm thinking it didn't feel right. But I made a decision on the spot. I said, John, as you know, we have a management division. I think you're going to make it. I think as you do start to develop, there's a lot I and we can do for you to get, to accelerate your career. Yep, sign the management deal. We'll let your tuition go. So John signed the deal. By the way, like 1 week after John got to OVW, he canceled the contract like in a 1-line or 2-line letter. I lost it years ago. It was pretty rude and to the point. And I know that was Cornette being on him. Whatever. So during this period of time, I put my hand in the guy's pockets, right? Jim, I knew John was going to make it. I would do talent reports, or a lot of people, Marty Rubalcaba, Todd Kennelly, Brett Wagner, we all contributed to these formatted reports, which I also understand, Jim, you later borrowed from us to use for your own reports at OVW. That's right, guys. Jim Cornette and OVW took the Rick Bassman and UPW developed report and utilized for their own, as they should, because, Jim, all this development territory supposedly we're in it together rather than hating on each other and insulting one another and trying to cause harm to one another. I was flattered and glad that you borrowed my reporting form. So thank you for that. Now, part of this reporting was making recommendations who I thought should be looked at for contracts. And I always knew it was a much different world back then, Devin. It was a godsend getting a development deal. It was a big, big thing. And there were few and far between. So getting one then was really something special. And when they came, they would come to me in a Federal Express envelope. I mean, I would await them like a kid on Christmas Day, not because of my 10% on $300 a week, Jim Cornette or anybody else that is still drinking the Cornette Kool-Aid, but because I'll look you in the eye or camera, you guys can all choose to believe this or not. Truly, one of my favorite things, if not my favorite thing to do in this business to this day, is to call somebody, a friend, or better yet, see them in person and deliver good news. Hey, you got this job, you got this booking. I always personally love that. It was one of my very favorite things to do. So I got a FedEx to the office one day and I knew what was in it. There were 4 developmental deals all at the same time. So I called a big meeting of all the teachers, all the wrestlers, all the students. I wanted to make a ceremony out of it. We taped all this. Part of it's in the Discovery Channel special, actually. And contracts that day were given out to Justin McCulley, who I mentioned before, who later became a UFC heavyweight fighter, Aaron Aguilera, who went on to become Jesus shortly for a short period of time in WWE with Carlito, and a gentleman by the name of Basil Bozinis, Bad Boy Basil, who sadly is no longer with us either. Justin actually turned his contract down. He had other ideas about what he wanted to do. It surprised all of us. Now, Justin's, Aaron's, and Basil's contracts were for $300 a week each. John Cena's was for $500 a week. Why? Because I went to WWF, I went to Bruce, I went to JR and said, hey, this guy works even though I didn't love him as a human, I'm like, this guy works his freaking ass off. He's got the goods. He's going to be a star for you. He also eats like a freaking horse. He needs to feed himself properly. can we get him an extra couple $100 a week in his contract? And they said, yes, we can do that. So I knew that his deal was 500. And the big ceremony, we handed the contracts out. It was great. A lot of tears, good tears. It was, it was an awesome day. Now, John was with me for not long, a few months after he signed the contract. He get his 500 a week. He would pay me, not me, Ultimate Management Group, a legitimate corporation, LLC that we set up for management activities. He would pay $50 a week. Had John got the deal everybody else was getting with no representation, he would have gotten it for $300 a week. So again, it's math. 500, he paid me 50. His net was 450, 150 more than had he done the deal himself. One more example with John Cena, and then I'll get done with this long answer. At that same time, we were booking a ton of parts in the movie, TV, and commercial industries. We had close proximity to Los Angeles. One school was in LA. I knew that industry. We made these like beautiful postcards, promotional pieces, and bought a subscription to it. And Devin, I warned you, this part might be a little boring, but it's my form, so I wanted to get this part out. Also, a subscription for $600 a month at the time to a thing called Breakdown Services. It's something you buy that's put out every day, Monday through Friday, in the movie, TV, and commercial world, where all the casting directors break down their scripts. That's why it's called Breakdown Services, and they describe the parts they're looking to cast. They then send them out to everybody that has a subscription. Well, I kept this subscription, I think, at $2,400 a month back then. Could be wrong, but I think that's what it was. And I would look for parts at a time. And we booked a lot of stuff. I mean, we booked, oh, here comes my, that's Eos and Dennis, two of my babies in the background there, by the way. They'll usually start barking. Hopefully they won't do that and interrupt us too much today. Hey, babies. We booked thousands of parts, a lot of fun stuff, all kinds of high-profile stuff. I got a breakdown one day for a thing called Manhunt. Now, Ray Hullett, who was Zap on the American Gladiators, she was already cast as a female lead. Ray was a friend and still is a friend to this day. I called Ray and I asked her if she can make an introduction to the producers for me, kind of go around the casting director, because the male lead reading it sounded to me like John Cena. So I submitted John for the part. I got right in on the phone with the producers, formed a very quick and easy relationship. They knew that they understood that I understood the business, became friends with Julie Warner, who was the producer. And after a lot of campaigning, we got John cast for that part, the lead in Manhunt. His initial offer for the season, and this is a long time ago, it won't sound like much now, initial offer, $20,000. I felt that was not as good as they could do. I felt like there was a bigger ask and still not push them over the edge. I got John $40,000 for that. I worked my ass off to get him that part. I closed that deal in the parking lot of my car at the Irvine Spectrum at my wedding anniversary while my wife, Gabrielle, was inside waiting at a restaurant for 2 hours. That's a schmuck that I was. That was a wrong prioritization on my part. But I stayed in the car. I closed the deal. I called John on the phone. John, the deal's done. And dude, got you 40 grand. John Cena, I'll never forget the response. Very magnanimous. Oh, well, don't spend that whole $4,000 somewhere, Rick. I hung up, went into the anniversary dinner, and I just thought, man, here's a guy who literally came crying to me just months before, who couldn't afford $250, who's now being not handed. He built his body, he built his personality to a place where he deserved that kind of deal. Don't get me wrong, but he's now earning $36,000. I am putting my hand in his pocket for $4 grand. So his 36, by the way, is 16,000 more than had he just taken the first offer. And that's how that hand in the pocket business works, Jim Cornette, dummy. All right, Devin, that's that answer.
All right. Before we, or where is it? That was a very detailed answer, and that is number 4 of 7. But before we get into number 5, Crypto Spasm tipped another $20. He says Jim Cornette used to be really good on TV, but with social media, he's a total freak. He's so jealous of you two. Also, guys, get the XRP tip box. It's 2 clicks. Cryptocurrency, and we'll make your platforms look real modern. Thanks a lot, Crypto Spasm. And yes, I do believe Cornette is jealous that my channel has more views. That's why he's tried to defame me. And for Bassman, Bassman's brought more famous people into the business than Cornette. But quote
Devin,
number
Devin, I have to ask you, because you probably know better than I do. Did Jim Cornette actually bring anybody into the business? I know that, mainly because of Danny Davis, he had a nice setup at OVW, and they were really good. I won't take this away from them about polishing wrestlers and getting them ready for TV. Cornette understands a lot more about that than I ever will. I'll give that to him. But I do have to ask, did they ever really bring anybody into the business? Because I can tell you, like with UPW was the first stop for not only John Cena, but The Miz and Chris Masters and Nathan Jones and John Heidenreich and Victoria and Sylvester Terkay, and the list goes on and on and on. So many that we, quote unquote, discovered and gave their start to, not even counting the ones that came to us to get polished and move up, which were like, Paul London and Spanky, Brian Kendrick and Ivory and Nova and a whole bunch of others. But did Cornette or OVW ever actually start anybody?
I don't know about. I don't know if Cornette has ever actually started anybody from scratch that's become a megastar like the Ultimate Warrior, Sting, or Cena or anything like that. He may have helped develop them along the way, but
he definitely did that. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into the quote number 5 of 7. This is the beginning of the quote from Jim Cornette. Quote, "Then I'll have you know we started doing shows at Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom here in Kentucky and had an exclusive contract that was our big fucking contract. OVW of the year. They paid us more money per capita for time and effort involved than the WWE did. And they called me up one day and said, say, we just got a brochure from this wrestling company saying they wanted to put shows on at all Six Flags. Oh, send that over to me." Bassman had made up flyers using Cena on the front of his flyer when Cena was already in Louisville. He wasn't in WWE yet, but he was already in Louisville working for us, and he sent them out to all Six Flags in the country trying to sell shows, and got to ours and said the official developmental territory of the WWE or something like that, when it wasn't at the time. He was lying because he did that often. He had a contract for like 6 months, but he said it was a development territory for like 5 years. So I called the office and got Jim Ross and said, you tell this little bald-headed piece of shit that if he ever sends any more advertising material to our Six Flags, especially featuring talent on the cover of his brochure that we've got on our show, I will find him and I'll fuck him up that little midget, bald-headed sack of shit, skull fuck him, and leave his remains in a ditch. Big words for someone that's ignored your actual challenge.
Yeah, you know what? It's like it's going to sound funny coming from a guy who's 5'4" and 135 pounds. That's me. He sounds like one of those like little yappy chihuahuas. You know what I mean? Like yap yap yap, and then they like head for the hills when somebody opens the door. But by the way, Devin, these next ones I did my long explanations. These next ones will go very quickly. Let's get with the factual part. Well, everything here can be addressed with fact. None of this is subjective. Here we go. First of all, I lied about being a development territory. So WWF legal at that time, and later WWE legal, was run by Ed Kaufman at that time. Really good dude. Ed was great. And Scott Amon, who is still there, was Ed's second in command. I think Scott's in charge now. Now, we used to have to submit to them in writing anything that we were going to put out promotionally, which used their names, trademarks, or intellectual properties. So the way we promoted ourselves as an official development territory was submitted to WWF and approved by WWF Legal. So, Jim, we were absolutely official. So, go do whatever you're going to do to yourself and your skull over that one. All right. The next one. I also lied about our period of time that we were, whatever, according to Jim, not an official territory. the amount of time of our association. He says I would lie about it being, I took notes again, 5 years, when in fact it was, he says, 6 months. Okay. I keep saying WWF and then WWE because I do differentiate both. UPW had 2 different developmental contracts with their organization over the years. The first was when the company was called WWF under Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard, who ran talent relations. That contract ran for a period of 2 years. So 24, now this is fact. This is just straight up provable fact. So 24 months, Jim. I know you're not dumb. So 6 months from 24, that's already 18 months longer than you are lying about, Jim. The second period was under John Laurinaitis' talent relations with Tom Pritchard backing him up. That's when the company was WWE. That lasted for a year and a half. So Jim, cumulatively, 2 years plus 1.5, Jim, equals 3 1/2, or 3 years longer than the 6 months you like to lie about. So, like I said, Devin, half truths, outright lies. So I've now, I hope, dispelled 2 outright lies. These are all very provable things. All right, let's get on to Six Flags real quickly. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, continue. I didn't realize you weren't finished answering that.
In Canada here, getting on to Six Flags. Back in the day, okay, so I had this is complex. I had this parent company called Ultimate Industries. Under Ultimate Industries were 3 other LLCs, limited liability corporations: Ultimate University, the school; Ultimate Pro Wrestling, the wrestling company and promotional arm; and then Ultimate Management Group. UPW would also do shows at a lot of casinos and fairs and amusement parks. Those are called sold shows. And that's when, like when you produce your own show, man, oh my God, anybody that wants to be a promoter out there, think twice. It is a very, very hard business. You invest, it's all on your dime. You're taking a big risk. You're rolling the dice, and it is a lot of stressful freaking work. When you do your own show like that, that's called four-walling a show. It's an industry term. When you have a sold show, that means you've gotten an organization like a casino to buy it from you. They pay you a fee, so you go in knowing that you're making a profit. You also get to pay the guys and girls a whole lot more money, which I love to do as well. Our guys were well paid for the sold shows. Not so much for the four walls because we were losing money all the time. On the sold shows, running the business like a business, something that old JC does not seem to understand. I reached out to legitimate, real, proven agencies that sell entertainment shows, things like plays and musicals and concerts and all packaged concerts like the Four Tops and the Temptations, who were represented at that time by a company called M&M Entertainment out of Huntington Beach, California, owned and operated by a guy named Michael Scavuto. Michael Jr. now runs M&M. So we contracted with M&M Entertainment, who were much better at selling shows than we ever could be, even though I knew how to do it. I knew the mechanism. This is what these guys did all day, every day. And a part of their business, being good at what they did, they knew every buyer in the country for a show of this sort. So when you sign with an agent like that, it's the producer, which is me and UPW's responsibility to get them the promotional materials that they need. Well, Jim mentioned flyer. That's a little insulting, but it's subjective. We didn't make flyers. I mean, we had, and you can look it up on my Facebook and Instagram, UPW, really, I prided myself a lot on our collateral material, the promotional materials. It was beautiful, done by really, really good artists, solid color, cardboard, usually 2 or 4-fold, meaning it was multi-pages. And we made a beautiful live show sales brochure, printed it up, cost a couple $1,000. We gave thousands of them to M&M, who then sent them to every single buyer in the country. Now, was John Cena on the cover of the one that landed on the desk of Six Flags Louisville? It's possible. I'm not saying, I don't know what the flyer is. I'd like to see it. I'm not doubting that at all. But if he was on the cover, there's 2 things I can tell you about that. One, there would have been tons, because we had like these big collages we always did with all of our talent, or not all, but most, that would be on the cover. So John would have been there with many, many other people. Also, it would have been produced at the time, John was still at UPW in California. So, Jim, if you think it would have been logical for me every time a talent got shipped out to recall everything that had been done and make up a whole new promo flyer, then think again. That's like saying that if you are at WCW in 1997 and Dean, I probably have the timing wrong on this, and Dean Malenko and Perry Saturn moved to WWF, WCW could no longer put out the DVDs that they produced at the time that Dean and Perry were with WCW. That's how the business works, dummy. You get the intellectual property rights so you can use these materials in perpetuity for promotional purposes. And that's what we did. So should I have recalled all those? That'd be pretty impossible to do. So maybe you think we should have. I don't know. The other thing is this. Maybe, and I don't even mean this sarcastically, but it'll sound like it. Maybe I should have thought long and hard about every place that OVW and Victor Canonius in Puerto Rico and Kevin Kelly in his territory were doing sold shows, and asked M&M to pull those labels from their mailing. Back then it was hard mail, it wasn't email. But I didn't do that, and I apologize. Maybe I should have done that, and I didn't. So that's how the stuff landed on the desk at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Louisville, Kentucky.
And the next one, number 6 to 7, is a very quick one. He says, quote, "The promo I cut on that fucking midget when I called up and left on his voicemail because I wouldn't answer his phone when it was over," end quote. I'm not sure what that's referring to, but again, he's bad-mouthing you again there.
Yeah, my understanding is this was after that aforementioned flyer landed on the desk at Six Flags. He went nuts. He did call, got my voicemail, and cut an awesome promo on me, man. It was freaking hysterical. And I really, honest to God, wish I still had it to this day. He then talks about trying to get a hold of me and over because he wanted to skull fuck me. And what did he say? Dispose of my body. That sounds like threats of murder, but whatever. It's all good. I don't press charges or look for restraining orders or that sort of thing. I wouldn't mind meeting in a room somewhere though, Jim. We can. And I'm not talking a hotel room, by the way, buddy. Don't get any funny ideas. All right, let's do the midget thing real quickly. I had to look this one up. All right, dude. Like I said, I'm 5'4", 135 pounds. I have better short jokes than anybody that I know. Honest to God. It's like I've never minded it. I really haven't. But whatever. You can think it bothers me. If give me a short joke. Give me a better one than the ones that I know. It's fine. It was sometimes an asset in the business, actually. I thought when I did manage, it made my guys look bigger. And I would actually spread my feet apart in my stance for photographs to make them look bigger and me look smaller, whatever. But Jim, by the way, just to set the record straight, we don't call them midgets anymore. We call them little people. But then again, God knows you are a racist, homophobic, misogynistic potty mouth. So why not insult every single possible person that you can, Jim? Midget, if you look it up, little person, is at the shortest 4 foot 10 inches. So Jim, you lied again. It's not even subjective. I'm a whole half a foot taller than a midget, Jim. What do you think about that? I had to get that straight. It's funny, Devin. I have to say this has got nothing to do with the questions. There's been 2 things that I've said for years I still wanted to do in pro wrestling as far as a performer. Not a very good performer, as I said before, but 2 things I wanted to do. One, if I ever had $5 grand or more than that, probably 20 grand to really just blow, I would do a show. I would look for 21 performing little people still in the industry, because when I grew up in LA as a huge wrestling fan, I used to go once a year to the 22-man battle royal at the Olympic Auditorium. The one that Bruno won one year, Victor Rivera, John Tolis, Rocky Johnson. That was my jam back in the day. I love the 22-man battle royal. And God knows I tortured my poor UPW guys with too many battle royals, 22-man battle royals. I would hire 21 little people, get in the ring with them. I would put on a black singlet, a giant fuzzy wig, and I would be mini Andre the Giant. And I would toss 7 or 8 of those little guys before I let them gang up and throw me out. That's one of the 2 things I still really want to do in this business. That's how sensitive I am about my midgetness, Jimmy. The other thing I've said for years is I'd like to do a call it in the ring match with Jim Cornette. You know, I almost said midget, the Little People Battle Royal. That's a fun thing to think about. The call it in the ring match with Cornette. I really want to do that now. No longer sounds like a fantasy. I'd like to make it happen. All right. Did I cover all the points there, Devin?
There's one more comment, and some of the midget wrestlers today do like to be called midgets still, by the way, because I remember on one poster I had little people and they said, please call us midgets because people don't understand little people.
Like Puppet would be the first one that would have told you that. And by the way, always feel free to call me a midget, please. Doesn't bother me in the least. You know, what is a little bothersome, again, is all these references to the skull fucking and things he wants to do with my corpse. You know, I don't know if the guy is so deranged that he doesn't really realize what he's saying. But, you know, if there is any, you know, modicum of reality in that, Jim, dude, let's do it, man. Let's put 10 grand up each. Winner takes all to their charity, with the loser having to personally make the donation. And yeah, as far as rules, let's not worry about it, man. You know, like I said before, you've threatened me for so long. You know, I've been pretty beaten up medically with the spine surgeries, the lung cancer, all that stuff. I'm doing okay now. 5'4", 135. You're 9 inches taller than me. You're probably double my body weight, maybe more than that. We're the same age, so my odds may not be great. But, you know, just to give you the satisfaction of of trying to do all these things to me that you've been saying you want to do for so long, I'll fly to Louisville on my dime, Jim, to give you that satisfaction. So, man, let's get to it.
And I do think actually Atlanta is not too far from Louisville. And didn't Luke Gallows say at his next pay-per-view, you guys could even settle it if Jim Cornette could get enough balls to actually take you on?
You know what? It's really funny. Yeah, at Talking Shop-A-Mania too. Yeah, and I love Luke. He's one of my very favorite people in this business. I would love to do it there for sure. Also, Damon Feldman, the owner of Celebrity Boxing, said he wanted to do it. My good friend Jennifer Thomas from Session Girls does this crazy event in Vegas. She wanted to do it there. Ali Marafi, the guy who owns Qatar Pro Wrestling in the Middle East, asked if we could do it on his show. Yeah, I mean, there's like no shortage of wacky venues to do this thing at, Devin. I would assume fly to Louisville, find an MMA gym in there, and just get in the cage and lock the door behind us. But whatever makes the most sense is good by me.
Now, for the last quote that you wanted to address, it is this quote. I think Sylvester Turkey had one of those deals where he had been trained out of UPW and signed a contract, and they tried to take some of his money, and that's one of them. I had to go to a lawyer, but I don't even remember who it was to get out of it. But anyway, I found out about this, and I called up and I videotaped this ass chewing and brought it to Danny Davis's Super Bowl party for all the boys who had come from California and knew who he was. You piece of shit, you business raping piece of fucking shit, trying to stick your hand in all these guys' pockets when you taught them nothing but how to write a check, and everything they got was on their looks and their talent, not your say-so, because nobody thinks anything of you but a piece of shit and a piece of dog shit on the heel of a wrestling boot of our business. So fuck you. They all like that. So anyways, yeah, Rick Bassman, fuck him. End quote. I wish he would say this to you to your face. I'm pretty sure we'd see a double leg takedown pretty fast.
Yeah, we'd see something probably. I got to tell you though, in person, if it were to go down, I probably wouldn't strike first, because after all these guys' threats and yapping, I'd wait for him to at least make a threatening move, because he probably would really push out and bring law enforcement into it if I were to just double leg him or something more drastic than that. Devin, I think we addressed pretty much. I think I got ahead of myself and addressed pretty much all of that already. We talked about, putting the hand in the pocket stuff. We talked about Sylvester Turkai. The promo at the Super Bowl party he's talking about, I know about that because Samoa Joe was there, and Samoa Joe told me about that not long after it happened. Guys they're in his clutches at that point. They're dependent upon him. They're under the influence of he and Mrs. C and the hot tub parties and whatnot. And they got to go along with it. He was a hard guy to fight against. Look, he slapped the hell out of Santino Marella, Anthony Santino, who wanted to be on this show, by the way. I've heard from so many Cornette's fellow lovers, by the way, or I should say Cornette lovers, Santino Marella and Ed Ferrara and Joey Janela, Sammy Callahan. They're like all encouraging me to Austin Aries, Nova, Mike Bucci. They're all encouraging me to go after this knucklehead, this goofball. But at that time, when you're at Cornette's party and you owe your life to OVW, yeah, you're probably going to go along with it. As far as me being a piece of shit and all those things, it's subjective, man. I have a lot of longtime friends in this industry that we are, although we're no longer engaged in a business capacity, we're still friends. And I could name, it would take many hands to count those names off. So I would like to think that not everybody thinks that. There absolutely, undoubtedly are people out there that think that of me, whether it's for legitimate reasons or not. That's their deal. That's fine. Hopefully people, any Cornette fans on here, Cornette lovers on here today, if they heard us out, maybe they'll have a different opinion than they did of me prior to this. Maybe they won't. I don't know. So that whole piece of shit thing's subjective, man. I don't know what else to say about that. We addressed the hand in the pocket deal. We talked about the promo at the Christmas party or the Super Bowl party. Sorry. And then again, it's just more threats of violence and all this horrible language, man. If Jim, I'll fly to Louisville. It won't cost you a penny. Go to a location of your choosing. And let's just do it once and for all, man. Have your way with me, buddy. I know you quite clearly have been saying you want to do that for a long time now. So I'm here.
Well, I think we'll have to do a Q&A another time because we've already gone about an hour and 20 minutes here. The one question I will ask you from one of the fans was there ever a time where you and Cornette got along, or was he always nice to you to your face? Or was there always tension there between you two?
No, you know what? To best of my recollection, and I could be wrong about this, I've only met him in person one time, and that was at the Astrodome when Rock and Austin were headlining WrestleMania, and Cornette was in the gimmick battle royal. I almost got in that battle royal as a gobbledygooker, by the way, until Hector Guerrero showed up at the last minute. That would have been awesome. But I think that's the only time we met in person, and everybody was very friendly. All the guys who ran the development territories were invited by the company to fly out, and we hung out, we talked, and he seemed fine. That's the only time we ever met in person. It seemed cool then. I can tell you this, after he started with the name calling and all that, and all the accusations, I still try to be the bigger man. I know, Cornette, you'll love the irony in that since you are double my weight and 2.5 heads taller than I am. I try to be the bigger man, and I actually invited him out to UPW to teach a seminar for a couple of days. I'm like, let him come see what we're doing. We're all in the same company here. We're all trying to help each other. Maybe if he opens his mind and eyes for a moment, sees what we're all about and what I'm all about as a person, meets my wife, meets my friends, all that sort of thing, maybe it's going to put all this under the bed. Instead, he came back with just threat. What his threat was, he goes, only thing I would do if I came out there for a seminar is tell everybody to run as fast as they can. Well, of course, I wouldn't bring them out then because who wants to chase all your students away? But he said, nah, he goes, I'm not going to do it because I'm paraphrasing because I don't want to get arrested for murder because that's what I'll do if I come out there. And further, I'll bring the 7-foot giant Matt Morgan with me to wipe out everybody in that school. And I later told Matt about that. I did Matt's deal for American Gladiators. So Jim, I had my hand in Matt Morgan's pocket also. That's funny, isn't it? Although I got him a much better deal than he would have gotten had he done the deal on his own. Matt will tell you that. Matt later laughed when he goes, I was going to come kill everybody there. I'm like, that's what Jim said. He goes, wasn't Sean O'Hare there? I said, yeah. He goes, and Tom Howard? Yep. And Luther Reigns and Sylvester Turkai? I'm like, yep. He goes, thanks a lot, Jim. So that's just Cornette being a knucklehead again, man. It seems to be a daily thing for him.
All right. So is there anything you want to do to close this up? Plug your social media and your YouTube channel, which is Rick Bassman, where you post your Talking Tough podcasts in full, where you've had some big names, and some closing remarks on Cornette, who you're very serious about fighting. This isn't a joke. You actually want him to either shut his mouth or fight like a man and stop being a coward.
Yeah, Devin, it's one of those. I hope it's one of those two things. He didn't respond to the first one. God knows there was enough press on it, enough people talking about it. I thought surely his response would be to come out with the same stuff over and over again, which is why I didn't really ever want to do this, what we're doing today. But I thought, in absence of him saying, okay, let's just do this fight thing already, that we'd at least get on here and go through my side of the story, since after all these years, have never done it. I thought it was time. I am serious about it. I don't know that I really have another good one left in me or not, but I do. I'm what's the word? I don't want to say passionate enough, because that might get Jimmy aroused again. I'm serious enough to want to do this. Yeah, I would absolutely fly to Louisville and do this, or wherever, or on big LG show, Talking Shopomania, which was awesome, by the way. I would love to do it there. As long as we can do a call it in the ring sort of deal, that would be awesome. Yes. As far as plugging, you already did it for me. YouTube.com/Rick Bassman, and then Instagram. It's Rick_Bassman. I'm so sorry I went on as long as I did. And didn't get to take questions. Guys, if you go post on Hannibal TV on this thread or on my YouTube, I'll answer any notes and questions you have. Because if you hung with us this long, I talk so much, it's the least I can do. So anybody out there that still hates me, that's your deal. I understand it. Anybody that thinks differently, thank you. I appreciate your support. And Devin, Hannibal TV, you're awesome. And thank you for everything.